my name is Kaitlyn Decker. This is my second girls' night workshop. I did one back in, I think it was April for Easter cookies. And today we're going to be making some holiday Christmas cookies. So I have a lot here. We're going to try to go through them pretty fast. But just to give you a little background on me, I have been doing cookies for about 7 years. About 7 years I've been doing cookies, and I started with Christmas cookies. And I said, this little reindeer guy, he was the first cookie I did, so I had to show you guys how to do them. But we're going to get started, and I'm going to show you guys how I do my icing, because when you're making cookies, it doesn't matter what cookie you're making, but the most important thing is your icing. I use royal icing, and I believe the recipe was in the files that are on Girls Night In online. Royal icing is basically just meringue powder, which is kind of like a powdered egg white, and powdered sugar, a little bit of flavoring, and water. So it's really simple to make, but it's very tricky trying to get the right consistency for your cookies. So I'm just going to move these to the side for a little bit. I almost dropped one. And here I have my green icing, a little saran wrap. And the reason it's tricky is because it is water-based. And I'm sorry, I know the iPad is blocking a little bit of my face, but you guys can see the cookies, which is important. So I usually start by adding a 3/4 cup of water, but at least where I live in the summer, it gets very humid. So sometimes I won't add as much water. Sometimes I add a little bit more. But the thing you want to look for is the consistency of your icing. So when you're doing your icing, it doesn't necessarily matter the amount you're adding. It matters what it looks like. So if you guys can see, this is what I use as my base icing. This is what I use to flood all those cookies to get that nice flat look. For like the Santa hat, you can see it's nice and smooth there. And I want it to be pretty runny, about the consistency of honey or shampoo. So when I mix this around, you can see it kind of goes into itself and it just kind of falls flat. And that's a great consistency for flooding. I'm also going to use a little bit of piping consistency icing, which is just a tad thicker and it holds its shape a little better. And I use this for some of the line work. Like you can see on Santa's beard, I might use a thicker icing than the flood. And I'll tell you guys what that is, but you guys can see the difference of these icings. This one, it doesn't kind of fall into itself. It holds that peak. But this one, it just kind of goes flat. So when you are doing cookies, like I said, it doesn't matter what cookie you're doing. Your icing is the most important thing. And there are tons of recipes online. You can use mine, you can use somebody else's. It doesn't matter. A lot of them work well. And you can flavor them with lemon extract, vanilla extract, really any flavoring you want. I wouldn't do, Mom, go. Sorry. So I would be, sorry, when you use vanilla extract, I would not use pure vanilla extract in royal icing, and the reason is because it has that brownish color. It would not give you a white icing. So if you're doing a color like green, you can use that, but if you're doing white, I wouldn't use it. And I'm sorry, I filled up my bag without showing you how to fill it up, so I'll fill up my other one and I'll show you how. But I'm just going to tie off the end in a little knot.
Excuse me, Kaitlyn. I just want to let you know that some people couldn't see both cameras, so I now am focused on your iPad camera. If you need me to just let me know. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's what my mom came in to tell me. So I'm gonna tie that off just in a knot, and it goes. All right, I'm going to, when I fill up my bag, I use tipless piping bags mainly because I don't like to clean the tips. I'm a little lazy. So when I'm done with this bag, I can just throw it away. I use Sinful cutter bags. They're my favorite, but there's tons of different tipless piping bags that you can use. This is just my preferred method. I fold the bag in on itself, kind of open it up a little bit, and I hold it in my hand like a cup. So I open it up and I hold it like a cup, and I have like my thumb is kind of stiff so that it's not going to fall in. and then I just scoop the icing out and I drop it in. And I do this with every thin icing, thick icing, no matter what it is. That's how I fill my bag. Some people use a cup to put it over. I don't do that just because I can't do it. It gets very messy when I try to do it that way. So I like to do just filling it up in my hand, move it down, twist it around, and then I'm going to just tie it in a knot. And then there's my icing bag. All right, there we go. So now I have my icing bag. In my 2 consistencies, when I'm doing this, I might label, like take a Sharpie and put a P on this one and an F on this one. So I know this is my piping and this is my flood. We're mainly gonna use the flood. And you can make all these cookies with just the thinner icing, the one that's like the consistency of honey or shampoo. You don't need to use the piping icing. You can use this one without the other one. Okay, so we're gonna get started. And we are going to start with our little hat, Santa hat. I am going to use some magic because when you're making these cookies, if you want to have that nice little division there, you can see like there's 2 separate lines. You don't want to put these right after the other. You want to wait a little bit in between flooding the 2 sections and let it dry just a little bit so that you have that nice division. So I'm going to start with just the red part of the cookie. And when I flood, and you can see, I'll show you the difference of the piping and the flood consistency. I think this is open. Okay. When I'm outlining a cookie, you want to tap where you start, and then you're actually going to pick your line up off the cookie and then drag it and drop it. And then now that's a little crooked because I had my thing sideways, but if I just do it like that, I'm gonna put a little dab, pull it up, pull it up, pull it up, and then drop it, and I get a nice clean line. I'm not going to drag my piping bag on the cookie because if I do that, it's gonna get all like squiggly and it's not gonna be straight. So when you're doing a line on a cookie, you wanna tap it, lift up your piping bag. I'm about a 1/2 inch off the cookie right now, and then just drop it when you're done. Gravity is a great friend to cookies when you're decorating. So you can make that nice clean line. So I'm going to start here and I'm just going to outline the red part of where my icing is going to go. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to tap. I'm going to lift up. And then I don't know if you can see, but my piping bag's about 1 inch off of the cookie. I'm going to go around, kind of stop there because that's where the little pom-pom ball is going to go. And then I'm going to come over here, tap it, lift up, tap it there, that corner, and then do my last line. Okay, and then there's my hat. So I'm going to just outline. You can let it dry a little bit, or you can go right in. The reason I like using this thicker consistency icing is that it makes a nice dam so that your icing doesn't fall over the sides. Probably one of the bigger mistakes people make when they start doing cookies is that they don't have the icing the right consistency. So they either get the icing spilling over the sides or it's too stiff and you don't get those nice smooth lines. So here I'm going to use the thinner, the flood consistency icing. And I'm just going to cut a very small tip. I don't like cutting a big hole at first. I always cut it very small. You can always cut a bigger hole, but you can't cut a smaller hole. So I'm going to do that. And then I'm just going to go in and I'm going to fill in the cookie. Some people like to outline and then fill in the middle. I like to just kind of start at one end and go to the other. There's no wrong way to do this. It's just whatever feels best for you. When I'm holding the piping bag, you don't want to hold it like this because it's going to pop out the top. So you want to make sure everything's down and you just hold it between your thumb and your index finger. And then you can use your thumb and your whole palm to really squeeze the icing and guide it. So I'm going to just kind of go around. And as I'm filling in my cookie, I'm making like a circular motion. That circular motion helps smooth out the icing. And because this is a thinner consistency, if there are lines in there, I can just kind of squiggle it around and it'll lay flat. So I'm just going to go around, just fill it in. Now I said sometimes I like to start at one side and go to the other, but sometimes it just kind of, I just go wherever it takes me. So I'm just going to keep going, keep going, keep going. And you can see when it's done, I use my icing bag and I'm not squeezing anything. So the whole time I was filling it in, I was squeezing icing and giving pressure. I'm not going to put any pressure on it now. I'm just going to use the tip of my icing bag to kind of smooth it out. And I have this one little edge here that was a little too. So I'm just going to do that very gently. And then I'm going to look, and I still have a little parts. You can shake it if you want. If you don't trust that, you can use, I have a little scribe tool. You could just use a toothpick and just kind of smooth it out. And there you go. And there's my nice hat. So that's one section. I would then let that dry for about maybe 10, 15 minutes before I come in and do the next section. We don't have that time, so I have one magically ready for us right here. So the next, I'm gonna go in and do the brim of the hat and the pom-pom. So I'm gonna cut my, oh, that's already open. I always keep a damp paper towel or a damp cloth because I'm always cleaning up icing. I have icing always everywhere. So I'm going to do the same thing. I don't need to outline along this line because there's already icing there. It's going to hold it nice and steady. So I'm going to tap, pull up. I'm off the cookie right now. I'm going to stop at this corner, and then I'm just going to tap and then pull it all the way over to the other end. When I use, if I'm using only the flood consistency icing to outline and fill in, I probably wouldn't go as close to the edges because I would be afraid it would spill over. When you're using a thicker consistency to outline, you can get closer to the edge, and then you can fill in the whole cookie instead of having a little bit of the cookie showing, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. All right, so I'm going to do the same thing up here. I'm going to tap and then drag around. Doing a circle is a little tough because you're kind of ahead of where the icing is falling. So you just have to kind of anticipate where it's going to go. All right, so there I have that. I'm going to cut that icing bag open. And this one, I want a nice smooth line there. So I'm actually going to start and just do a line right along there because I want it to be nice and smooth. I don't want to have any divots. I'm just going to go right along. There we go. And then I'm just going to fill in. This one's a little thinner than the red icing actually, so it'll fall into itself nicely. There we go. When you have a thinner icing, you want to make sure that it's not too thin. Like I said, I keep saying that like shampoo or honey consistency. If it's thinner than that, it kind of sinks in on itself and it doesn't have that nice puffy look. So you want to just be careful. When I do my outline, I don't do it too thick because I don't like to see the outline on the finished cookie. I like to only see the smooth top. So that's why I do the outline in a little bit of a thinner line than I do the rest. So now I'm going to come up here and do this little pom-pom. And there we go. And this cookie could be done, but I wanted to add a little bit of texture. So I'm going to show you how I made that little texture to make it look like fur. I actually have a paintbrush. I forgot to get over. All right, so I have this little paintbrush, and it's just, this one I think is Wilton brand, that Wilton you'll see at Michael's and Joann's or any craft store. Really any paintbrush would work as long as you haven't used it for paint before. You know, you don't want to have paint on your cookie, but this is the Wilton brand. And I forgot to say, for red for the red icing is very tricky to get. And you don't want to use the food coloring that you get from the grocery store, because that is like a liquid and it's not going to give you a dark color. And sometimes with red, you'll dump all the color in and it still won't be as dark, but the red color will develop over time. So if I know I'm doing red, I will make it maybe the night before I need to use it, like this one, so that it was like it was a pinkish color last night and now it's a darker red. And I hope everybody can see. Can you use a Ziploc bag for the icing? Yes. I started using Ziploc bags. You just want to make sure that you have the one with the just a regular Ziploc bag, because one time I accidentally used it where it has that flat bottom and that didn't work very well. But yes, you can use Ziploc bags for the icing. For outlining with the thicker icing, you just want to take the piping bag, you want to tap the corner, and you just want to lift up. Oh, that broke. So if it breaks like that, it's because you're not putting enough pressure on the icing bag. If you're not, so you want to be squeezing continuously. And you can just like bring it up. You can do a circle and drop it. Okay. So if you want to practice that before you do it on a cookie, you could always do it on like parchment paper or something like that to get that, to practice that line work before you get onto the actual cookie. To do the fur, I'm just going to take my white, it's the thicker white, and I'm just going to draw some squiggle lines on it. And then all I'm going to do is take this paintbrush, I'm going to make sure it's a little damp, and I'm just going to dab it in. And it's going to give me a nice little rough texture. And this is great because this little texture, you can use it for sand if you're doing beach cookies in the summer, really anything. Or I've seen people use it for like teddy bears or anything that you want to have like that furry texture, and it just kind of makes it look a little bit more unique, but it's super easy to do. So I'm just dabbing it, dabbing it, dabbing it. And then you can see it has that nice little texture right there. All right, and I'm going to do the same thing to the pom-pom ball. If you put too much, it'll be a little bit more of a blob and not as much of a kind of stipple. But I'm just going to stipple it, stipple it. There we go. And there we go. I have my nice little Santa hat. And that one cookie is done. So it looks like a really nice cookie. It looks great on a tray, but it's pretty simple. It's only a couple steps. So what's the benefit of using the bags over the ketchup dispensers? Nothing really. It's really personal preference. I didn't like the bottles because it hurt my hand. I could never get the right consistency in them, and it just didn't work for me. So a lot of stuff you'll see me doing is personal preference. But there's really no difference, I would say, between using the ketchup bottles to using piping bags. Yes, I outline with the thicker frosting and then I fill it in with the thinner frosting. You could outline and fill it in with just the thinner frosting. If you want to just start it, you could just outline. You could do the same thing with the thinner frosting and just let it dry. This is my thinner frosting that I filled in the whole hat with, so I can do the same thing. You don't have to use the thicker icing to outline. You could just do the same thing with the thicker frost or with the thinner frosting. All right, so I'm going to put these to the side. And next we'll do the little wreath. So this is the wreath. One thing you'll see that's different between this and the hat is that there's no dimension. This is, you can see the holly berries, but this is just a flat cookie. And that's called a wet on wet technique, because everything I'm going to do is while the white icing is still wet. So I'm going to take it, I'm going to outline with, I'm just going to use the thinner icing for this one. So I'm going to start, I'm just going to go around with the thinner. I actually hate doing circle cookies because I can never draw a circle. So my circle always looks a little off. But you know, it always looks like a nice cookie anyway. And then I'm just gonna fill it in. So this one, because I know I said you can outline and fill with just the thinner icing. So I just wanted to show you how to do that. So I'm just gonna go around, fill it in. And I'm constantly moving my piping bag. I'm never stopping. I'm just always moving it. And then once it's completely filled in, I'm gonna just kind of take my scribe or your toothpick and just kind of smooth it around. And there you can see it's all nice and flat. Actually, I think it's gonna go off on the side a little bit. Take that. There's always a fix when you're doing cookies. So I'm just gonna scrape that off the side. All right, so now I wanna do the holly leaves. And I'm gonna take these two greens. They're both the same thin icing as the white. And I'm just going to immediately go and do a zigzag around the cookie. So I'm just gonna go and start with the darker green. And I'm just putting a little bit of pressure and I'm just doing, and it doesn't have to be perfect. If they're not the same size, that's fine because they're gonna work out. It's just gonna look pretty at the end. All right, so there's my one color green. I'm gonna use my lighter green. And I like doing two different greens for this because I think the two-tone just kind of gives it a little bit of extra something. I'm just gonna do a zigzag. I'm hoping you guys can see this. There you go. Now, while it's still wet, this is all in right away. You don't want any of the icing to set or to dry. I'm gonna stick my scribe tool in or your toothpick, whatever you're using, and I'm gonna stick it in and just draw around. You don't wanna put it all the way to the cookie. If you're scraping the cookie, you're too deep. And I'm just gonna put it right in between and I'm just gonna swirl it around. And I'm just gonna go around a couple times just to make sure it's nice and good. And there I have my little holly wreath. And you can see, there we go. And it's got those, it just kind of gives it a really nice look and it's super simple to do. You can go in and put your holly leaves in right away, or you can wait until it's dry. So I can go and put my holly leaves in here. There's some holly leaves. And then these ones, because I'm putting them in right away, again, these ones will fall flat. Or if you want to wait, let this dry about like 10-15 minutes. So it has a nice crust over top. And then I can put my holly leaves here. And that just kind of gives it a little bit of dimension. So it's not a completely flat cookie. So that's just, you know, two ways to do the holly berries. And I see. Oh, the practice circle. This is actually, it's something called a not a cookie. It's not a cookie. It's just something plastic that you can use to practice cookies on or to practice decorating on. So you can get this from a bunch of cookie supply stores. I know like Flour Box Shop, it's Flour, FLOUR Box. They sell these. Truly Mad Plastics is another good cookie supply shop that sells these. And it's just like a practice circle that you can just practice your icing on. And I'm just gonna do my dots. And you can do a nice little bow. For my bow, I actually have these heart sprinkles that I got around Valentine's Day. I know they still have heart sprinkles in the craft shop, and you can just put them on and they just make a nice little bow and you don't have to do any work for that. And it just looks very cute. There we go. So I have a little holly wreath. And it took about two, 3 steps and it looks so nice. People love it. Very easy to do. Again, these are practice. You just want to practice these. My first cookies were not this great, but with practice and just trial and error, you can really make some nice cookies. All right, so now we're going to move on to, we'll do the Christmas tree next. Nice little Christmas tree. So for the Christmas tree and for the Santa cookie, you'll notice that I have lines on them. I use food color or food safe markers. This one is Sweet Sugar Bell brand. This one is Food Writer. I think you can get these from like any grocery store. This brand you can. And sometimes when I'm doing a lot of cookies that are a face or like the tree, I want to draw on it just so that I can make sure that I'm doing the same on each one. What type of butter are we using? I think I just used like the BJ's wholesale brand, or I think it was like Keller's, so unsalted butter. I get it in bulk as much as I can. So yeah, just any brand of butter. I found that Land O'Lakes or Keller's are the two that I use the most, but I know other people have said like Aldi's brand works really well. I've never used that personally, so I don't know how it works, how well that works. But for the tree cookie, I want to make sure that I have those dimensions between the layers. So I'm going to do the same thing I did with the hat. I'm going to do the top layer and the bottom layer first. I'll wait about 10 minutes and then I'll fill in the middle. And then after all those layers are done, you can put the lights on the tree. So I'm going to do the same thing. This is that green icing that I mixed up at the beginning. When I'm doing a shape like this, I want to find a corner. So I'm going to start here and go around, same thing. I'm going to tap, draw up, drag your, you're not drawing. Here we go. And I'm just going to go around. When I'm doing curves, I tend to put my icing bag closer to the cookie because I have more control over where it's going, but I'm still not actually touching the cookie. You still want to be above the cookie. So I'm going to do the same thing at the bottom. I'm going to bring it around. Go up and then just... when I'm doing cookies like this though, I'm usually doing a dozen or so at a time. So I might flood all of or outline all of them and then go back and do the flooding. So there is a little bit of wait time between when I outline and when I flood. I'm getting a stock of icing bags over here. Just want to clean up my space a little bit. All right, so now I'm going to go through and I'm going to fill in and I'm going to, yeah, that's the right icing. I'm just gonna do the same thing I've been doing. Keep my icing bag moving as I'm going. I don't want to stop. Royal icing dries pretty quickly. So even if I were to take the hat that we filled in first, it would have a little crust over top. And if I were to, it looks like it's dry, but if you were to touch it, you would put an indent in it. And then there's almost no saving it once you do that. Unless you want to put like an ornament or a flower on top of it. I'm going to make that hole a little bigger just so I can go a little faster. All right, and I'm going to do the same thing down here. I cut my hole a little bigger so it's coming out a little faster. Fill it in. Like I said, I try to have a plan when I fill in my cookie. Sometimes there's just no rhyme or reason. I just fill it in where I go. And if you were doing this with sprinkles, if you didn't want to pipe on the ornaments, I would put the sprinkles in right now while it's wet. And that way they dry within the cookie and they'll be like stuck on there. Royal icing is the same thing that people use for gingerbread houses. So if you make it super thick, it is like cement when it dries. I'm sure many of you guys have been making gingerbread houses as the weeks have gone on, but this is the same icing that you can make for a gingerbread house. Okay, so I have my 2 layers done. I would let them dry, like I said, for about 10 to 15 minutes. And then I'm just going to, I don't need to outline along that edge because there's already icing there. So I'm just going to do these sides. And there we go. All right, so I have my sides filled in. And now I'm just going to fill in my cookie. One thing, when I'm filled in next to something, I don't go on top of that. I kind of put, it's hard because I can't see it now, but I'll put it like next to it and then almost stop putting pressure on my bag and push it into the side. And that way I'm getting a nice clean line when when it dries. I'm not getting like a squiggly line. So I'm going to take this. I'm going to just kind of press down that little tip that I made. And press down that little tip. And there I have my tree. And you could always stop there. You could add in your sprinkles there. You know, it's a Christmas tree. You can do whatever you want with it. So here's my Christmas tree. I'm going to use black icing for the string. And black is the same as the red. I will sometimes make up a large batch of black icing and then keep that because black is really difficult to get to the right color. So you might want to make it and have it set for a little bit. And then I'm just going to do the little string lights. So I'm going to start here. Well, I probably cut that hole bigger than what I wanted. So this is where this black is the thicker consistency because I want to get a nice clean line. I ran out of room on my cookie, but you guys can kind of see if I do the black, it's going to hold its shape when I do those lines. But if I were to do that in this green, it kind of falls in on itself and it's not as clean. So you can kind of see the black holds its shape a little bit better than the green is. So when I do line work on top of a cookie, I have it that thicker consistency. So I'm going to tap, go over. I'm going to do the same thing down here, tap, and go over. Okay. And then I'm just going to add in my Christmas lights. So, oh, whoops, I dropped my yellow. And I'm going to do just a dot here. And a dot here. Here. And I'm just kind of putting a little dot, swirling it around. I'm going to do my blue. I think my blue's already cut. Oh. Oh, not coming out. There we go. All right, and then I'm going to get my red. Dot, dot. And there's my tree cookie. And if I wanted to, I could always add snow along it. You know, you could add some, you know, sprinkles or whatever you want, but there's our tree. I'll put that to the side and we'll do, what time are we at? 3. Okay, I'm going to speed through Santa and the reindeer because I know we're getting a little long. All right, so for the Santa cookie, again, I drew out where my icing was going to go. I always do it whenever I'm doing a face on a cookie because I just want to make sure that they're the same all across. When I look at Santa, I want to look at the sections that are next to each other. So I can see that this white at the bottom and this red at the top would be the best ones to do first. So I'm going to outline his beard. I got icing all over that. Paper towels are your friend when you're making cookies. And you will find that you will have icing all over yourself. I found icing in my eyelash one time. I don't know how that happened, but it just gets a little messy. Squiggle around Santa. And then around his face. And then I can fill him in. There we go. So there's Santa's beard. And now I'm just going to do his hat. If you don't have a Santa cutter, because I didn't for a couple years, if you have a turkey cutter and you flip it on its side, it will make a good Santa. There's his head and there's, you know, the turkey's feathers. This is a Santa cutter, but you can see the turkey inside of it. So that's just a neat little cookie flip. So there I have the hat filled out. I'm just gonna fill it in. Now these, if you want to start and you've never made cookies before, like I said, it's a lot of patience and it's getting your icing the right consistency. Starting with the Santa hat and maybe the Christmas tree and the wreath would be great. The Santa's a little bit more involved because there are so many sections, but he's, you know, just the same technique. You want to fill and go, or outline and fill. It's the icing is the main thing that you want to practice. So if you want to do these really nice cookies, make sure that you have your icing down before you want to start. All right, so now that I have his hat done, I'm going to fill in his face. And I have this this skin tone. To get this skin tone color, I typically use AmeriColor brand food coloring. And I believe this is a drop of ivory and a drop of copper. And that's how I get this color skin tone. So I'm going to outline. Oh, I don't have a, this is all the flood. Just going to fill in his face. This was a little thicker than I probably would want, but I'm just going to swirl it around and he should flatten out. So if you have your icing is a little thicker, you usually can save it. It just takes a lot of patience. But sometimes if it's too thick, it might not flatten out. But if you find that you can't get it straight, you can always shake it, tap it, and then your icing will be nice and flat. Now that I have my Santa almost done, I'm going to do the brim of his hat. So I'm going to just outline that. And then I'm actually going to do his nose and his eyes. Ooh, whoops, I forgot the one side. So you're just kind of looking to see which sections are touching each other. And if they touch each other, you don't want to do them at the same time. And then once one section is flooded, you can, you know, let it dry and then do the details on top. So then for his little nose, I'm just going to do a little dot. And for his eyes, I'm going to use the black and I'm going to use a little bit of the white. And what I do for his eyes is I'm going to do a big black circle. And then the one thing that makes eyes look really great is just doing a little dab of white in the corner as a little reflection of his eye. And that just kind of brings him to life. And it just gives Santa that little twinkle in his eye. So just those two little dots. I did 2 in each eye. You could just do 1 in each eye, but that just kind of brings his face to life and makes his eyes look a little more alive. Since his face is dry, I can do his eyebrows now too. I'm taking the stiff white icing and I'm just doing an eyebrow shape. One eyebrow always looks better than the other because that's just the way eyebrows work. But there you have his little face. So like I said, Santa's a couple more steps than our other cookies. but it's the same techniques we've been using. So I'm not doing anything different than the other cookies. I'm doing the same techniques. It's just a couple more steps. And that's the thing with cookie decorating. It just takes a lot of patience, and you just want to make sure that you get it going. All right, fill in the little pom-pom. And now I can do his mustache. Oh, I didn't give this guy eyes or eyebrows. Whenever I do a mustache, it never looks the same because I don't know. I can't do a mustache that looks the same. So I'm just doing a little ball and then I'm dragging it over. So I'll show you for the other side. I'm just going to do a little ball. And then I'm just going to kind of drag it. Oh, you couldn't see that. I'm going to do a little ball here and then just kind of drag it out to a little point. And there's his mustache. The swirls, I'm just going to do little swirls along his beard. So I'm just going to do a swirl there. I'm just kind of following the shape of the cookie. Santa cookies, they all have different beards. So just kind of do what you think looks best for the beard that your Santa has. You don't like seeing Santa's beard. There we go. All right. And then he's got little swirls. All right. And like I said, the Santa, he's, it takes practice, but it was just a couple steps. I didn't do anything that was crazy. I just kind of filled it in and took my time. So I started out, I just did the bottom beard and the hat. Then you did the face, the eyes. The thing to do this, like I keep saying icing consistency is the big thing, but if your icing is the right icing, it's going to be perfect. Make Santa, yeah, you could make Santa with colored eyes. You can make Santa, I mean, the possibilities are endless. I even see a lot of people who don't like to, or I do this sometimes too. I'll use my marker, but you could do like a little swoop. Because once this icing's dry, you can draw on it. So you could just do those little 2 swoops and they can make a cute little Santa's face. But if you let this icing dry overnight, you can draw on it, no problem. For the royal ice cream, it's 2 tablespoons or 2 teaspoons of powdered sugar. It's 2 pounds. Oh yeah, 2 pounds. So I use a full bag of Domino sugar. It goes right into my icing. And it makes about 5 or 6 cups. It makes a lot of icing. I use a lot of icing, so it's good for me. But it is, because I don't use any milk or anything in my icing, you can store it at room temperature and you don't have to do anything fancy. You can just put it in an airtight container. And then when you open it back up, you just have to mix it a little bit because if it stays for a while, the water and the sugar will separate. So you'll notice that it's really stiff on the top and it's almost completely water at the bottom. And that's because the water and the sugar will separate. So if you ever store it for like a day or 2, you want to make sure that you give it a really good mix when you open it up. I think that was all. Mine is too thin, I think. How do you thicken it? So, okay, to thicken it up, you just add in more powdered sugar. I would just start with like a teaspoon of powdered sugar and just pour it in until you get to the thickness that you want. I should have said that at the beginning. And then to thin it out, I have a squirt bottle. So I just use the squirt bottle and I add the water until it's the right consistency. But all of my icing comes from the same batch. I'll separate it into the different batch and then I color it all in one. And then I change up the consistencies. I add the water or add powdered sugar to it. Yeah, and glasses would be great on Santa. The powdered egg white in the icing does not need to be refrigerated. So I don't use, it's not powdered egg whites, it is meringue powder, and that is pretty shelf stable. I wouldn't refrigerate it if you are worried about keeping it on at room temperature. I would freeze it, but it's not powdered egg whites, it's meringue powder. So it's a little different. I don't know all the science that goes into it, but yeah, the meringue powder is safe to keep at room temperature. I wouldn't keep it for like, a month or so, but like a week, it would be fine. All right, so next up, we're gonna do our little reindeer. And this is actually, I had to show you guys this cookie because this is the guy that got me into cookies. I saw this little guy on Pinterest 7 years ago and I had to make him. But it is from a gingerbread cookie and I just flip them upside down and it becomes reindeer. So meringue powder does have powdered egg whites in it, but I think there's also like cornstarch and powdered sugar. There's other stuff in it. There is a difference between powdered egg whites and meringue powder. I just don't know the full difference. I know it's different though. I probably should know. I need a new paper towel. I don't know where they went, but move all my old icings over to the side. Okay, so for this little dude, I'm just going to draw his face and I'm going to use the thicker consistency of the brown just because I'm not filling in the whole cookie. So I want to have a pretty distinct shape. So I want to start there. I'm going to go all the way around the head of the gingerbread. And then the top half always looks, I always feel like it looks funky. You almost want like a peanut shape. And I'm just going to go around and he's not completely even, but it'll work because once you fill him in, he's going to be so cute. You can't not like it. All right, so now I'm going in with my flood brown. I'm going to start down here and just kind of fill them all in. And when I made this cookie the first time, I was using icing bags. It took me, I think, like 8 hours to do like a half dozen cookies. I was trying to be such a perfectionist and it took me forever, but they turned out cute and they're gonna work wonderfully. So here, I filled it in. Here's my guy now. I'm gonna do his little ears next and I'm gonna do one of his eyes. You could do his eyes together, but I like seeing that little division between the eyes. I had a little trouble with his eye last night when I was doing this, but I like to see that little division between the eyes, so I do them one at a time. So I'm just going to use my regular white flood. I'm not going to outline. Because I'm just doing a quick little oval. There we go. I'm going to do the same thing I did with the Santa eyes. I'm going to put a black dot here or a black oval. And then I'm going to put a little highlight in his eye. That was bigger than I thought, but it'll work. The one thing I always say is people will always, well, no matter what your cookie looks like, it's going to taste the same. So even if you see mistakes, everybody will love it. I always say I do something and I'm like, oh, this looks horrible. And everybody's like, oh, it's amazing. So you will see 100 imperfections in your cookies, but everybody will always love them. So I just did a little squiggle for his ear. And I'm just going to come underneath and fill it in like that. Do the same thing on this side. So the arms of the gingerbread are the ear. And then I'm just going to fill it in. There we go. So I would wait for them to dry. You could do the underside of the ear at the same time, but I let them dry because I like having all the different pieces. Makes it more complicated. And I'm using the same color that I used for Santa's face. I'm using that skin tone color, and I'm just going to do like a little circle underneath. It doesn't have to be perfect because it's just his ear. There we go. And you'll see cookies on Instagram or Pinterest, and you just want to look to see where, like what piece would you do first? Because a lot of cookies, I'm using the same technique. I'm just outlining and filling. I'm not doing anything too crazy on them. It's just a lot of steps. So now I'm going to do his other eye. All right, and I'm going to do the little black part. And sometimes his eyes are not the same size, but they kind of are. And we'll do his little highlight for his eye. Oh, you can't see his highlight from last night, so I'll put that in there. And then of course he needs to have his red nose. This, I think I'm just using the flood consistency red, same thing as the eye. I'm just doing a little plop of a circle right here. And there he goes. All right, so for the antlers, you can see I did them in 3 steps. I did the big antler, and then I filled in with the 2 little ones. Okay, so I just used the same flood, or not the flood consistency, the thicker consistency icing, and I'm just gonna draw that little swirl. It looks like my piping bag is touching the cookie. It is not, it's still up off the cookie a little bit. And I just drew that. Now I'm gonna draw the smaller one. Up here. Oh, whoops. And there I have his little antlers. And I'm just gonna do the same thing on the other side. I'm gonna just kind of go around, and it's not as thick as I want, so I'm gonna go around and do a little thicker. I'm just putting more pressure on my piping bag when I want more to come out. And then I'm gonna do the bottom one, and then the top one. And then I just gave him a little hair because it looked like he needed something up here. And that I just did 3 lines. So I just did 1, 2, 3. Kind of like, if you can see it on this one. I'll do this closer up here. So for the antlers, I just did, oh, it's hard doing this when I'm holding a cookie in the air. So I just did that. That didn't turn out that great. But like I said, it still tastes the same. And I just did that one there. And then I came up and I did the same thing up here. And then for his hair, I just did, I'm gonna clean this off a little bit. I just did like 1 line, 2 lines, 3 lines. And there's his hair. And my little reindeer's done. So that is all of our little cookies that we made. And here's our reindeer for our full set. I think that was a little bit over the time frame I wanted, but we got them all done. How hard does your royal icing get? So mine doesn't get as hard. If you want it to get hard like a gingerbread house, you want to add more cream of tartar. Yeah, so the Franken frosting, people add corn syrup to it. That makes it a little bit more elastic. I've never done that just because I've never tried it. Mine works well for me, but mine doesn't dry that hard. If I leave it for like a week, it'll be hard. It'll be pretty hard, but after like a couple days, it still has like a nice bite to it. Actually, even after a week, it still has a nice chew, like not bite, a chewiness to it. But if you leave it for longer than that, then it will get hard as it goes. And the red icing, I know I talked about how that develops over time. It still develops sometimes after it's dry on the cookie. The one time I mixed up, I needed like a dark crimson. So I just added a ton of food coloring in. And then by the next day, it was almost black when it dried on the cookie because it was just too much food coloring. Food coloring, I use AmeriColor just because it has more variety in the colors that they have. They sell them in these large jugs. I only get green and red in the large jugs. Other than that, they have these little packs, and you can get packs of these off Amazon. They'll sell like sets, so they'll sell like 12 color sets, or I think I got like a 50 color set. But that's the color I use. You can use Wilton. They sell that at most craft stores, but they don't have as large of a variety in colors, so I don't use them too much. Hard after a week in the airtight. Probably, I would say a week it wouldn't be that good. or sorry, a week it wouldn't be that hard. After like 2 weeks to a month or so, it would get pretty hard. But I usually heat seal my bags. So I guess that would be the same as, or I heat seal my cookies in bags. So it would probably be the same as a airtight container. But I mean, they last for a pretty long time because they're cookies. So I heat seal them and that keeps them safe for about 2 weeks. But like I said, they're not that, mine don't dry that hard. Mine have a nice chew to the icing. So you can always test it out and see what you like. If you do want to add corn syrup, I think you add about a tablespoon of corn syrup to your icing, and that'll kind of soften it up a little bit. Yep. What did you use for the reindeer's nose? I just used this red icing. So I just have the reindeer right here. So I just took I'm gonna just hold them up. There we go. So I just took the red and I just did a little circle. There we go. And that was the thinner red icing. So I used the thinner red icing for the nose because I just kind of plopped it on in a circle and it worked. So I just did the thin red icing for the nose. And I think that was all the questions. If I didn't answer one, let me know. But yeah, so I think that was all the questions. I hope you guys enjoyed our cookie making, and I hope you are able to make some wonderful cookies. But have a great Christmas.